galactic Concord research vessel, Stardust Wanderer, drifted through the shimmering veils of the Krell Nebula. On board, Elder Lyra of the Cygnian Ascendancy, a being of flowing crystalline structures and serene, ancient eyes, observed the human, Dr. Eris Thorne, with polite detachment. Thorne, a xenolinguist of some small note, was currently engaged in what Lyra considered a rather baffling ritual. He was throwing a soft, brightly colored ball down a short corridor for his companion animal. The creature, designated Bolt, was a canid, genetically engineered, Thorne had explained, for enhanced spatial awareness and anomaly navigation. To Lyra, whose species experienced companionship on a telepathic, centuries-long societal level, the focused, almost doting attention Thorne lavished on this four-legged, barking organism was peculiar, typical of humans, Lyra mused. So young a species, so quick to form intense, illogical emotional bonds with fleeting, non-sapient life. The grief they displayed upon the cessation of such creatures was, to most conquered species, a perplexing expenditure of emotional energy. Bolt possesses an uncanny ability to sense micro-distortions in local spacetime, Thorne was explaining to a skeptical Xylan engineer, whose eye stalks twitched with barely concealed amusement. Within nebulae like Krell, with its unpredictable radiation currents, his senses often provide a more intuitive map than our standard long-range sensors. He doesn't just see the path, he feels it. Bolt, having retrieved the ball, trotted back, dropping it at Thorne's feet with a happy pant, tail wagging furiously. Thorne ruffled the fur on its head. Lyra registered the interaction. Intuitive map. More human sentimentality, assigning complex reasoning to simple animal instinct. Still, the human linguist was useful for their current mission, attempting to decipher faint, complex signal patterns emanating from the nebula's core. The serenity was shattered by a sudden, violent shudder that threw them all against the bulkheads. Klaxons blared, a harsh, jarring sound utterly alien to the Stardust Wanderer's usual calm. Red emergency lights pulsed, painting the corridors in blood-hued strobes. "Shields down, hull breach, deck 7, a panicked voice shouted over the ship-wide calm. "We're boarded, Void Pack pirates." Void Pack. The name itself sent a chill through the multi-species crew, notorious, ruthless. They took what they wanted and left little behind but wreckage and sorrow. Chaos erupted. Heavy footsteps thudded on the deck plating above. The sounds of energy weapons discharging echoed through the ship. Thorne scooped up Bolt, holding the startled animal close. "Stay with me, boy," he muttered, his academic demeanor instantly replaced by a grim tension. The door to their research lab hissed open, not with its usual smooth efficiency, but blasted inward by a concussive charge. Two figures filled the doorway, a hulking, four-armed grok, its tusks stained, and a slender, insectoid Kate-Chak, its multifaceted eyes glittering. Both wore the jagged, mismatched armor of the Void Pack and carried crude but effective pulse rifles. "Well, well," the Kate-Chak chirped, its voice like scraping glass. "Look what we have here, conquered eggheads, and a little snack," its gaze fixed on Bolt, who let out a low growl, pressing closer to Thorne. "We are unarmed researchers," Lyra stated, her crystalline form shimmering with indignation rather than fear. "Under conquered protection. This vessel carries nothing of significant material value to you." The grok chuckled, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Conquered protection means little out here, old crystal, and value is in the eye of the beholder." It gestured with one of its rifles. "Everything is valuable to the Void Pack, starting with your ship." The pirates began to herd them out of the lab. Looting was clearly underway. Other crew members, faces pale with terror, were being pushed along the corridors. A brutish reptilian pirate shoved Thorne forward. Bolt, startled, yelped and nipped at the pirate's leg. It happened in an instant. The reptilian pirate, snarling, swung the butt of its heavy rifle without a second thought. There was a sickening thud, a small, broken cry. Bolt went limp in Thorne's arms. Time seemed to stop for Eris Thorne. The shouts, the alarms, the pirates' harsh voices, everything faded into a dull roar. He looked down at the small, still form in his arms. Bolt's eyes were glassy, a thin trickle of blood matting the fur on his head. His companion, his friend. The small, warm presence that had shared his quiet cabin, his long research voyages, the one who had, in his own way, understood the silent language of the stars alongside him. Gone, killed, casually, for nothing. The pirate who had struck Bolt laughed. Stupid mutt. Something inside Aris Thorne, something deep and usually buried under layers of academic reserve and gentle politeness, snapped. The grief was a cold, black hole, but around its edges, a white-hot, razor-sharp fury began to coalesce. He didn't shout. He didn't weep. His face, moments before a mask of shock and sorrow, became utterly, terrifyingly blank. He carefully laid Bolt's body down on the deck. Elder Lyra, observing him, felt an uncharacteristic tremor. The human's emotional output, usually a vibrant, if somewhat chaotic, spectrum, had suddenly flatlined, replaced by something cold, focused, dangerous. "Move it, human," the reptilian pirate growled, prodding Thorne with its rifle. Thorne didn't look at the pirate. He looked at the ship around him, the Stardust Wanderer. He knew its systems. Bolt, with his uncanny sense for the ship's resonances and energy flows, had inadvertently helped him map its every quirk, every hidden conduit, every subtle electronic whisper during their long hours together tracing the nebula's anomalies. Bolt had felt the ship's pathways. Now Thorne felt them too, but with a different purpose. He allowed himself to be herded with the other captives into the main mess hall, which the pirates were using as a temporary holding area. Captain Grawn, a hulking, scarred, Krogan-like alien with cybernetic augmentations, was overseeing the looting, barking orders at his motley crew. Thorne sat quietly, observing. His xenolinguist's mind, trained to decipher alien languages and cultural cues, was now analyzing the pirates, their command structure, their interspecies rivalries, barely concealed beneath a veneer of shared criminality. The way different species among them reacted to stress, to authority, to opportunity. He catalogued it all. The human Thorne, Lyra transmitted to another conquered elder via their subtle internal comms. His emotional state is alarming. The grief is there, but it is weaponized. Weaponized sentimentality, the other elder scoffed, even in their dire situation. Unlikely. The first opportunity came when a clumsy Orion pirate, tasked with guarding the captives, became engrossed in trying to pry a decorative panel off the wall, hoping to find valuables behind it. Thorne, moving with a silence and speed that no one would have associated with the mild-mannered academic, slipped a discarded power conduit, small, heavy, and conductive, from beneath a damaged console. He approached the Orion from behind. A single, precise strike to the Orion's primary nerve cluster at the base of its skull, a spot Thorne had noted from studying its anatomy during pre-mission briefings. The Orion collapsed without a sound. Thorne took its sidearm, a crude but functional energy pistol, and slipped back into the shadows of the damaged mess hall just as another pirate patrol passed the doorway. He didn't rejoin the captives. He melted into the ship's service ways. The Stardust Wanderer became his hunting ground. His first act was to access a secondary environmental control panel. He knew the Kate-Chak were sensitive to certain atmospheric gas concentrations. A slight, almost imperceptible increase in nitrogen levels in the engineering section, where several Kate-Chak were attempting to interface with the ship's main drive, would make them sluggish, confused. He rooted it. Then, using his linguistic skills, he tapped into the pirates' unsecured comm channels. The Void Pack was a mishmash of species, their common tongue a crude pidgin. Thorne began to subtly inject misinformation, a whisper in Grokkish about a hidden stash of valuable ship components that the Kate-Chak were trying to keep for themselves. A faked Kate-Chak transmission complaining about the Grok leader's incompetence. Small seeds of discord, planted in fertile ground. Captain Grawn started hearing reports of his crew bickering, even scuffling. Equipment malfunctions plagued their efforts to control the ship. Lights flickered out in critical sections, only to come back on elsewhere. Doors sealed unexpectedly, trapping pirate teams or separating them. "What is this incompetence?" Grawn roared into his calm. "Is this ship haunted?" Elder Lyra, still with the main group of captives, began to understand. The malfunctions weren't random. They were targeted, precise, and they often occurred just after Thorn had been sighted as a fleeting shadow in a distant corridor or when a pirate suddenly collapsed, clutching a sparking piece of their own equipment. One pirate, a volatile avian species, was found in a cargo bay, screeching in terror, convinced the ship's ventilation system was whispering threats in his own native dialect. Threats Thorn had carefully constructed from linguistic databases and broadcast through a localized speaker. The human was a ghost in the machine, turning the Stardust Wanderer itself into a weapon. He used his knowledge of the nebula's strange radiation, which Bolt had helped him understand, to subtly alter sensor readings, leading pirate search parties into dead ends or areas prone to minor system failures due to the radiation. The oh shit moment for the pirates came when Thorn lured a heavily armed group, including the reptilian who had killed Bolt, into a cargo bay supposedly holding valuable medical supplies. Once they were inside, he sealed the doors and vented the bay's atmosphere, not completely, but enough to trigger their emergency vacuum breathers. Then, through the bay's speaker system, in the reptilian's own guttural language, a single, cold phrase echoed. For Bolt. Before they could react, a series of small, precisely placed explosive charges he'd scavenged from emergency repair kits detonated, not to kill, but to rupture the coolant lines of their weapons and power packs. The resulting chain reaction of failing, overheating pirate tech was devastating. Captain Grawn, hearing the explosions and the panicked, cut-off screams, felt a prickle of genuine fear. This wasn't a ship fighting back. This was one human, the quiet, bookish one, the one whose pet they'd killed. Lyra and the other conquered members, witnessing the systematic dismantling of the pirate operation from their enforced observation, were stunned into silence. The human they had dismissed as overly sentimental was now a cold, calculating engine of vengeance. His grief hadn't crippled him. It had forged him into something terrifyingly efficient. The trivial bond with his animal companion had apparently been a tether to a depth of protective fury they could scarcely comprehend. Thorn never engaged in direct, prolonged firefights. He was always one step ahead, using stealth, misdirection, and his intimate knowledge of the ship, knowledge enhanced by countless hours spent with Bolt tracing its internal scent of energy flows. He was turning the pirates' greed and disunity against them. The final act came as a conquered relief vessel, alerted by the Stardust Wanderer's initial distress call, and perhaps by some strategically leaked signals from Thorn showing the pirates in disarray, finally arrived. With the pirate ship now in chaos, its command structure fractured by infighting and unexplained accidents, its crew terrified of the ship ghost. They put up only token resistance before attempting to flee. Thorn, from a hidden control nexus, had one last gift for them. As the pirates tried to disengage their docking clamps, he activated the Stardust Wanderer's emergency magnetic containment field, usually reserved for catastrophic breaches, around their primary engine nacelles. The sudden, intense magnetic pulse fried their systems, crippling their escape. When conquered security forces boarded the Stardust Wanderer, they found a scene of bizarre, methodical carnage. Pirates were either dead, incapacitated, or cowering in fear, babbling about a silent human shadow and a vengeful spirit. Captain Grawn was found locked in his own brig, having been tricked by a false message in his second-in-command's voice, a message Thorn had perfectly mimicked. Eris Thorn was found in the small research lab, sitting quietly beside Bolt's covered body. The energy pistol was on the floor beside him. The cold, terrifying focus was gone, replaced by a vast, weary emptiness. He looked up as Elder Lyra entered. "The pirates have been neutralized, Dr. Thorn," Lyra said, her voice holding a new note of awe and perhaps a little fear. You saved us." Thorn just nodded slowly, his gaze returning to the still form under the cloth. The few surviving Void Pack pirates, those not driven mad by fear, told wild tales when they were eventually interrogated. They spoke of a ship ghost that hunted them, a silent human who commanded the shadows. They whispered about the Soul Beast, whose death had unleashed a vengeful protector. The Galactic Concord was profoundly shaken. Their understanding of human psychology, particularly the depth and consequence of what they had considered lesser, emotional attachments, underwent a radical re-evaluation. Dr. Eris Thorne was officially commended for his bravery, though many Concord elders now looked at humans with a new, wary respect. The idea that such a calm, academic individual could transform into such a devastating force due to the loss of an animal. It was deeply unsettling. A new, unwritten rule began to permeate the shadier parts of the galaxy, especially among those who might cross paths with humans. Never, ever harm a human's pet. It wasn't born out of a newfound respect for animal life. It was born out of a cold, pragmatic fear of what a grieving human, pushed too far, was capable of becoming. The legend of the xenolinguist who wept and waged war served as a chilling reminder.